So hello and welcome back. I love it when the camera starts before I'm even ready, which it does from time to time. It's so funny because it's just a regular Samsung phone that I'm filming on, but it's set up so that if you do this, it's supposed to start automatically if it's in selfie mode. And sometimes I don't even have to do that. And I just hear it go bling, and I'm like, oh, we're recording. So, anyway, hello, how are you? I had a wonderful birthday. I did feel a little bit guilty taking the night off and not doing the chapter recap. I was gonna say as a result we're gonna do two today, except really kind of had to do two anyway because it's a little bit of not really a filler chapter, the first one, but a little bit filler chaptery. Um, so yeah, that one's not going to get super in depth. We'll talk about it a little bit, but it's a lot more description. And this is one of those cases where I really, really wish that copyright weren't a thing because the description is absolutely phenomenal, but it's a lot of just description. So we'll talk a little bit about where we are so far. And so far, Harrier and Tercel are now journeying with not only a dragon, but a unicorn. And not only a unicorn, but a very irritating unicorn. Um, Kerta and Harrier do not get along. I mean, I feel like Harrier can be a very prickly person no matter what. He sounds like he would be one of those that's a very good friend, like the best friend you could have, but you have to take them the right way. I had a friend like that when I was living in Tennessee who could just be the world's most abrasive, terrible, not terrible, a great friend, but just very abrasive and very, very direct, very blunt, but also a really, really good friend. But there were a lot of people that just couldn't handle that person, and I always could. We always got along. But I feel like that's kind of how Harrier is. And Kerta is annoying. she's she's very pushy, and she does not get much better. She is a very pushy unicorn, and I feel like even Shulkin would probably be like, leave me alone, please. So we now have Harrier, Tercel, Kerta, and Ankildar all traveling through the Elven lands, and hopefully Harrier, who has discovered that he is, as Kerta said, the first night mage since Kellen Tavadon. Isn't that exciting? Hopefully he doesn't kill his new unicorn friend before they get out of the Elven lands. So that was where we left them. And then we went into the Mandirian desert where we met again Sharia and her tribe, the Nalzindar, who fled across the Barileth, which, and I'm, because I can't pronounce things from our world any better than I can pronounce things from this world. The Barileth reminds me, at first I was going to say Death Valley, but there is a part of, I think, the Sahara Desert, and I think it's called the Rub Akali, probably butchered that reminds me even more of the Barileth. It's sort of the place where even the desert dwellers don't really go because you can't really live there. You might be able to get across it, but you're not gonna do it well. Anyway, she led her people through that to a lost city. And not gonna lie, that and this next chapter that we're going to be describing or going through makes the explorer in me go, I want to go there. I don't actually want to have to cross some nasty desert to get there, but I would totally love to explore. So we're going to be jumping back in and recapping chapters 3 and 4 of The Phoenix Endangered by Mercedes Lackey and James Mallory in the series The Enduring Flame. Chapter 3 is titled The World Beneath the World. So when chapter 3 picks up, the Nalzinder have now been almost a month into the city of Ali Abadashar, and they've started really exploring. Sharia is very, very thankful because they're finding that down below, not up on the surface where the sun will kill you, but down below there are rooms that have got little holes open to the upper world that let the sunlight through. And there are, well, as she puts it, underground gardens filled with trees and grass and vines and bushes, with animals such as no one in the desert had ever seen, such as the large, fat, fluffy-tailed tree-climbing mice, squirrels, and the chattering black-furred man-like creature the size of a young Eculus puppy, monkeys. And there were other animals, such as those that would belong in the Atreyu cities, the shaggy red-coated swine, the goats, the bright-plumaged birds, and doves, and tiny bright birds that no Nalzindar had ever imagined could exist, which I'm assuming are probably hummingbirds, or they could just be small tropical birds. It goes on to say that, they can now safely have not just enough to live on, but there's an abundance, and there's even so many things that they're starting to carefully sample the unfamiliar fruits and things that are here. And also, since there was so much game, there is now plenty of fat for their lamps. So they're really starting to explore going down, because this city was built down into the ground, which makes sense if you're going to build a city in the desert. And granted, they can't go fast, but they start exploring. And Sharia is really interested in trying to find other ways out. They haven't found too many so far, and most of the other secret exits that they found would only let 1 or 2 people out at a time. But, she knows that it's very wise to know escape routes from your bolt hole. Although she does stop and think that if they're discovered and they would have to escape, there's really no place that they could escape to. So she decides that they are going to just trust to the gods of wild magic to keep them hidden, and that's about all they can do. Now they've been there for a little while and exploring all the time when Sharia's best friend and age mate, so a girl about her own age, which Sharia is somewhere between, I would say, 18 and 20. She's very young. I mean, she is the leader of her people, but she's very, very young. And her best friend, which I'm going to butcher her name too, Ciniran, Ciniran. Cinerian? We'll go with Ciniran. Anyway, Cinnamon comes to her and said, well, doesn't even say anything. She comes to her because the Nelsinder are very silent people, and sets a jar such as they've never seen before, completely made of glass, very large, very finely made, and then, without a word, opens up her belt pouch and starts putting out like a golden cup that has a big, huge bowl to it, and golden coins and little statues with like jewels for eyes. And Sharia's like, where is this from? And Cinnamon lets her know that she was exploring, and in a chamber that is 3 levels below the one that they're in. Now, if you remember, they're in the 2nd level down from the ground. So in a chamber 3 levels below were rooms and rooms filled with stuff like this. Treasure. That does make Christine's heart go pitter-patter. I don't even think I would sell treasure. I would just, you would just see heaps of treasure behind me, because I like having stuff just to have it. I mean, money is good too, but it's the discovery of it that would make me excited. Sharia asks Cinnamon how much, and Cinnamon's like, we could fill the packs of every one of our Shotars, and we still wouldn't have it all. And so Sharia and Cinnamon decide that they are going to go down and investigate this further. They're not going to tell any of the tribe, because even though the Nelzindar don't want for anything, as far as they don't envy the city dwellers, Sharia knows that gold fever can overtake just about anybody. So they head down into this strange chamber, and as they go down, Sharia notices that on this 4th level down, that the walls are beginning to be ornamented. She can't really see what they are too well because they don't have enough lamps. You know, she only brought one, and so she can't really read the story in the walls, but she can tell that it's a story in pictures, and quite well done and very beautiful. And that's about it that's down here. We've got pictures on the walls and very little else. Not even really evidence of any animals down here, because it's getting down into the area where it's not only too dark for most things to live, but it's getting cold, because the deeper you go in the ground, the colder it gets, until then it starts to become the opposite. So they go down, and Sharia notices that not only is there art on the walls, but all of the barriers, doors, Sharia doesn't know that word because she's never seen one before, but all of the doors are different shapes, and they're all ornamented. Some are inlaid. Some Sharia looks at closely, and she can tell because of flakes on them that they used to be painted. It's all very fascinating. She opens any of the barriers that she can. Some of the rooms contain pretty much nothing except for dust, which they deduce was probably at one point scrolls or books that have just wasted away, deteriorated with time into just nothing but dust, that will cause a massive sneezing fit when you open the door, because of course they would. And then other of the rooms seem to be like sleeping chambers, and still others are the treasure chambers with just heaps of stuff. There were more cups, both the tall-footed sort and the more familiar ones, such as Sharia might use herself, though hers were clay or wood, not gold, silver, or glass. There was a bowl of gold, so large Sharia could not encircle it with both arms, and it was filled with what seemed at first glance to be fresh fruit. both the figs and sand plums familiar to any desert dweller, and the strange new fruits the Nalzindar had only found here in Ali Abadashar. But when Sharia touched them, they were stone. So this is just a room filled with beautiful objects of art and treasure. Sharia finds ropes of jewels and all sorts of other things, and Cinnarin's like, what do we do? And behind her, Cinnarin refilled the lamp with deft motions. I do not know what to think, she said. Sharia drew a deep breath. I think, she said, that should we need cups for drinking or bowls for washing, it would be good to remember this place and return. But if we do not, there is nothing here that is of the least use. And that is where the chapter ends. Like I said, it's not really a filler chapter, but it is definitely a very descriptive chapter. And it's one of the ones I really enjoy because I am an explorer at heart. And I want to go to Abi Abadashar. I want to go exploring and see places that aren't just empty. I mean, that's just like a dream. Could you imagine, like, Sir Edmund Hillary when they opened up King Tut's tomb and it was actually full of stuff? That has to be such a thrill. And you almost never see stuff like that anymore. I mean, every now and then you find something that's hasn't been looted, but very rarely. You know, saying that almost makes me think it would be even more fun to just know where it is and go there and sit and look at it. I don't even know that I would have to bring back the treasure, because it's just so cool to see it. Archaeologists fascinate me, by the way. I actually watch a lot of archaeology TikTok, or not TikTok, YouTube. I don't know why I said TikTok. And it's really interesting. I love stuff like that. So Abi Abadashar makes me excited just thinking about it. Anyway, we're going to move on and discuss chapter 4. We're going to be back with the boys and their dragon and unicorn friends. And chapter 4 is titled Magic's Cost and Magic's Price. And like I said, we're back with the boys. And when we left them, they were just moving out on their very first day with Kerta the unicorn. And as they stop, Tercel can see that Harrier was no closer to making up his mind what he was going to do with this whole night mage nonsense, but he was a lot closer to fighting with Kerta. Kerta either didn't notice or was completely to the point where she didn't care Harrier's mood. And on a normal night, Harrier would stop and set up the camp, and Tercel would go off and practice spells with Ankeldar. But Tercel's like, maybe tonight, maybe just tonight, we'll stay here in camp and make sure that Harrier doesn't kill the unicorn. So Tercel takes the saddle off of Ankeldar, and Ankeldar curls up by the fire like an enormous scaly kitty cat. And Tercel's like, I feel kind of useless. I mean, there's not much that he can do other than stay out of the way since he's just been doing spell work. And Harrier's got a system, and Tercel just doesn't want to get under his feet because Harrier's already in a mood. Quoting, "But when Harrier was in a temper, the best thing to do was to stay out of his way until he cooled down. Only Kerta didn't seem to have any interest in letting Harrier cool down. As he unhitched the horses and returned and turned them out to graze, as he unrolled the thick blanket of fine mesh quilted around heavy bars of fired clay that the elves used to protect the earth from the heat of their brazier, as he filled both the fire pot and the brazier with charcoal and filled the kettle with water, and began preparing the soup for the evening's meal, Kerta pestered him with incessant questions. Although, Tercel thought, listening, they were closer to demands. You really have more important things to do, you know, don't you? Well, if you mean to do them at all, and I have to say you don't seem terribly interested. Don't you know how many people there are who yearn all their lives to be chosen by the 3 books? And here you are, you've had them almost an entire day, and have you looked in them even once? You aren't even carrying them. You could have spent the whole day reading the Book of the Moon. I'm sure that you'd at least be able to cast fire by now if you had. It's a simple spell, you know, and it doesn't even have a mage price. But you haven't even read it. And you're going to need to know what's in the books, you know, and how to cast spells. Isn't this what you want? After all, you're a night mage. Harrier's like, not yet. And Kerta keeps needling him and needling him and needling him. And she's like, well, you're going to have to learn to cast spells, lots of spells. And you're going to need a teacher, and you're going to need... Tercel interrupts because he can see that Harrier is had it just about up to here with Kerta. And he's like, I thought wild mages didn't need teachers. Kerta stopped and looked at him, blinking as if she had forgotten that he was there. Tercel stared into her glorious blue eyes and found it hard to remember what his question had been. He couldn't imagine how Harrier was not only managing to be mad at her, but had evidently managed to stay mad at her for the whole day. She was so incredibly beautiful that it was simply hard to think about anything when you were looking at her. Kerta rolls her eyes at Tercel and is like, and I thought you were smarter than he was. Everybody knows that the 3 books are where the wild mages learned to do everything. But Harrier is a night mage, and he's going to need somebody to teach him to fight, isn't he? Everybody knows that. Which makes Tercel think, maybe Harrier does have a point. Maybe she is annoying. Tercel and Kerta pick up their bickering, and Keldar is like, you know, everything that you boys know about wild magic and wild mages is, it's not wrong, it's just incomplete. And Tercel's like, wait, what? Tell me about this. And Keldar lets them know that magic is long and complicated, and humans are brief and short-lived. And Keldar explains a little bit, and Tercel's like, well, what about elven mages? And Keldar tells them that they're a little more long-lived, but even they don't know everything because they're not eternal. And they talk a little bit, and it manages to distract Kerta, at least, and it keeps the boys' interest. Harrier's like, okay, but wild mages keep the balance, right? And Keldar answers, indeed, and men and elves are only a part of the balance. Some wild mages weave spells and pay prices to set in motion events which their grandchildren will not see come to pass. I have a riddle for you, Harrier Gillian. Does the weed thank the gardener? That's not a riddle, said Tercel. Of course not. No gardener wanted weeds in his garden. Tercel's own mother uprooted them ruthlessly whenever they appeared. But Harrier was looking thoughtful, and not as though he liked the idea of being either the gardener or the weed. But it did help because Kerta was also distracted and went wandering off, letting them eat their dinner in peace, which is good. After dinner, the boys go to wash up and they talk a little bit about the whole magic thing while doing the homey task of just washing the dishes. Harrier asks Tercel if they are near the border of the Elven lands, and Tercel's like, I mean, what do you mean by near? Because everything looks kind of close when you're up in the air on a dragon's back. And Harrier's like, just, I mean, we kind of have to know because I would like to know how soon before we get more supplies. And speaking of supplies, Tercel, said Harrier, how are we getting supplies once we're out of Elven lands? And Tercel's like, what do you mean? And Harrier asks him, you got that dragon, eats a whole lot. What are we going to feed it? Because I don't know if you took geography, Tercel, but I sure did. And there's no towns. Like, there's not a whole lot on the maps that extend out even to the Elven lands. But he looked at the maps back in the city that I can't pronounce, and there is like nothing. There might be a few scattered houses here and there, but there is nothing until you get almost to the Mandirian Desert. And we don't even know how far away that is. So we're going to have to figure out how we're supposed to live and feed your giant black kitty cat with scales friend. And Harrier's like, or Tercel's like, huh, I never thought about that. So with yet another problem to surmount, Harrier's like, yeah, we probably should start thinking about it, maybe eventually, or see how many things that we can get at the next stop that we make. In the morning, after they do their dishes and go to bed, Tercel gets woken with the sound of, surprise, surprise, Harrier and Kerta arguing. Kerta's like, it's beautiful. Look, the sun's all bright. You could sit down and read your books. Harrier's like, I got a lot of stuff to do. I gotta feed the horses, water the horses, cook breakfast, pack up the wagon, harness the horses, and I might just burn those books if you don't shut up. Kerta tells him that you can do whatever you want with the books. You're not going to damage them, and you're not going to get rid of them unless you give them up. And Harrier asks her, wouldn't burning them count them as giving them up? And she tells him, I guess it would depend on how you burn them, which makes Tercel interested. And then they all start arguing about intention in magic because Tercel just doesn't understand how the wild magic works with the whole intention thing, because that's not how magic is supposed to work, at least according to his understanding of high magic. Kerta ends the argument with, just read your books and you'll find out, to Harrier. Later on, Tercel, once he is up with Ankildar, is like, does intention matter with magic? And Kildar's like, well, it does with the wild magic, because the wild magic is pretty much alive. And Tercel's dumbfounded and says, but that's not my magic. And Ankildar lets him know that in pretty much every aspect, except for the fact that they are both forces for the light, that the wild magic and the high magic are pretty much diametrically opposed, which, kind of makes sense to Tercel, but it just seems utterly ridiculous. And Kildar tells Tercel that, yeah, that's what Kellen used to say. Long before he became a night mage, he had spent years being trained to be a high mage. Tercel thinks that it's very fascinating to hear more aspects of Kellen the poor orphan boy, but he has his own questions like, how can magic know what you want instead of what you just tell it to do? And Kildar tells him that the wild magic doesn't really care what you want, it cares what it wants and what you need. To which Tercel says, I don't think we should let Harrier know that. So they fly on, and Harrier has already got the wagon stopped and is rummaging around for lunch by the time they reconvene together. Kerta looks cheerful, and Harrier hasn't killed her yet, which is always a good thing. And Tercel lets Harrier know that there's a farm coming up and, he should reach it by evening. And Harrier's like, that's cool. Well, you guys should just go straight ahead to the farm. Don't worry about doing your loop-de-loops. We'll be fine. We'll get there since you said there's nothing in the road. And Kerta's like, you'll have the rest of the day to just read while he is up at this farm. And yeah, that's when Kerta manages to even irritate Ankeldar, which I didn't think was possible. Harrier lets Tercel and Ankeldar know to go on ahead. And, he says, there's no reason for you to fly around in circles for the rest of the day just because Nathaniel and Duleon are not as fast over the road as Ankeldar is. Well, who is? Said Ankeldar. I am, said Kerta. The dragon lifted his head, and Tercel could almost swear he looked affronted. I just figured that was kind of funny, because you know that someone's irritating if they manage to irritate Ankeldar. I mean, he's, what, probably at least a couple thousand years old? It takes a lot to irritate him. Harrier is like, yeah, whatever, Kerta, shush. And Tercel's like, okay, I can just fly on ahead to the elven place, but what am I supposed to tell them? Harrier rattles off a bunch of phrases that would be considered polite by the elves, since he spent so much time getting hit anytime he made a mistake by Germain's grandchildren. Harrier is pretty good at the whole elven courtesy thing. Tercel marvels at it, and Ankeldar's like, I'll prompt you, Bonded. Don't worry about that. And this is kind of funny. You'll want extra supplies, said Kerta. You'll need a lot more apples just to begin with, and oat cakes, and maybe even some of those. I'm not feeding you, said Harrier. Don't you have someplace else to go? Oh, no, said Kerta. I'd be so bored anywhere else, and I'm not bored here, and someone has to make you do the right thing. Tercel grabbed for the teapot quickly. Kerta might be a unicorn and a creature of magic, but he didn't think that there was anyone or anything that could make Harrier do something if he had made up his mind not to. So I guess we could say that Harrier has oppositional defiance. I think most of us do. So they get along, Tercel and Ankeldar flying off, and Harrier, Kerta, and the wagon all moving at a slower pace, heading towards the farm, which is called Blackrowan. Harrier, whose perspective we have now shifted to, thinks to himself, the elven farm, or village, or whatever, was called Blackrowan. Kerta, in his own mind, he added "that stupid unicorn" every time he thought about her, until all he heard in his head as her name was simply Kerta the stupid unicorn. And Harrier didn't give a damn whether or not unicorns could actually read your thoughts. If she was eavesdropping, she deserved whatever she heard. But she had mentioned offhanded that they were on the road again to Black Rowan Farm, and she had said that Black Rowan was famous for its fine fruit cordials, that the area was not suitable for rice but did good for silk, and that the nearest city to Black Rowan was Tamerla Baron. Elvish names. And it didn't matter because they weren't going there. In short, thought Harrier, she just didn't shut up. Harrier was pretty certain that he could get her to stop talking if only he would say that he wanted peace and quiet in order to read the 3 books of wild magic, but he was damned if he would do any such thing. The harder she pushed, the harder Harrier dug in his heels. He does reflect that he probably should read them. He even means to at least take a look through them. He didn't actually want to, but he kind of felt at this point like it's probably his duty, since he is the very first night mage to be called by the gods of wild magic since Kellen. And he hates it. He thinks that most people would think it was just great. Harrier could think of half of his classmates who would think that it was awesome, and that even back when he was a little kid, they were all running around the playard with their sticks that they were saying were swords, pretending to be Kellen, the poor orphan boy. Harrier just doesn't want to. He thinks back to the only battle he's ever really seen, the one with the goblins, where Samara died, and yeah, if that's what battle is like, he wants nothing to do with it. Don't blame him all that much. And, of course, he thinks to himself, as I feel like most people do at some time or another, Harrier thinks, I'm only 17. I shouldn't have to think about stuff like this. Personally, I think I say that even at my age now. I'm like, I'm only 52. I'm not an adult yet. Never true, but, I think we all feel that way. And Kerta pipes up yet again, and she's like, you're awfully quiet. And Harrier shuts her up in a very Harrier way by saying, I'm wondering if they know any recipes for roast unicorn back at Black Rowan Farm. They do manage to get to the Black Rowan Farm, and along the way, Harrier marvels yet again that they had spent pretty much 2 moon turns in the last elven city, and they'd been stopping whenever there was a farmstead or anything. And he still doesn't know how on earth elves manage to make things that just seem to appear. One second you're looking at a forest, and then the next minute you can actually see a house among the trees. Totally, absolutely weird. But thankfully, Black Rowan Farm was easy to find. Not because it was easy to see, but because Ankildar was sitting in front of it, which makes it very easy to find. He goes around and he's trying to figure out where on earth the outbuildings are in this layout, because he can't figure it out. And he turns to ask Kerta, and she was nowhere to be seen. Harrier thinks to himself, that's odd, but kind of welcome, and they'll probably see her tonight. Harrier does find the barn to put the wagon into, a place to stable the horses, and goes into, of course, since he's staying in an elven house, a place to bathe, which is absolutely wonderful. He exchanges pleasantries with their hostess, an elf whose name is Sirakar, and goes off to bathe. Absolutely wonderful. Harrier and Tercel banter a little bit while enjoying the luxuries of hot water, soap, and a nice warm towel. Things that they used to take for granted, he thinks, and definitely not something he takes for granted anymore. Tercel and Harrier banter even more. Tercel is like, hey, where's Kertha? Harrier's like, your guess is as good as mine. She was right there when I turned off the main road and I looked around and she was gone. Why, did you think I murdered her? It's a tempting idea, but, she is a creature of the light. They banter a little bit more as the chapter ends, and the only thing that really truly gets Harrier out of the tub is Tercel telling him, because this is Harrier we're talking about, that dinner's ready, which gets Harrier out of the tub and ends the chapter. So that chapter is good. It makes me rethink ever wanting a unicorn if they're anything like Kerta. I mean, Shulkin was pretty cool, but have you noticed, because I was thinking about it, I was like, okay, Shulkin was sarcastic, not really mean-spirited, but definitely sarcastic with kind of a biting sense of humor. Kerta is, yeah, I'm going to agree with Harrier, kind of annoying. And the way she's written definitely makes me think young, but a little bit annoying. Shulkin, although he could be annoying, also could be very supportive. And then I was thinking about the only other talking unicorn that comes to mind right away is Jewel from the last battle in the Chronicles of Narnia books. And even Jewel could be a little quippy, I think. Been, 2 years since I reread those? So, yeah, putting together those three, I don't think I want a unicorn. Who am I kidding? I would totally take a unicorn, but I might rethink it if they're all sarcastic and a little mean-spirited. I'm hoping that more are like Shulkin than are like Kerta, though, because she's annoying. But do you see what I mean when I said I feel like she's written as though she's young? Because she also feels like about a 10-year-old annoying girl who thinks she knows everything and probably actually doesn't. Anyway, thank you for listening. Sorry about going off on weird tangents there at the end, but it's all the weird things I think about. What would you do if you were in Abiyabadashar and got to explore? Like, would you be cautious? Would you be like Sharia and be like, yeah, we don't even need this stuff. It's all absolutely useless because it's not practical. I think that's the thing that makes me the least like Sharia. I like her. She is a very wonderful leader, but she's also very practical and very focused. Which is good if you are leading a tribe of people in a desert with scant resources, but definitely not me. Not the life I am built for. Anyway, what do you think of the Lost City and everything like that? What do you think of Kerta? And I will see you next time.